guest today is Chris Vosse, Business Systems Analyst with Teradyne. Chris, welcome.
Thanks.
So the old adage, or maybe the new adage I should say, is that the forecast is always wrong, and it's becoming more and more difficult to create accurate forecasts. We just can't see the future, whether we like it or not. And so in replacement of that, perhaps we need greater agility. I wonder how that statement kind of fits with your own organization. How do you view that?
Honestly, I think it fits very well. In fact, I would assert, and we've discussed in the past within Teradyne, that we haven't been able to accurately forecast for a long time, right? And it was just kind of fooling ourselves. And so years ago, we really embraced this philosophy that, no, we can't. So what can we do about it, to the point of having a more agile supply chain? And so what we began doing was a process of informed risk decisions. One thing you should understand about Teradyne, and I think this is probably true of a lot of companies these days, many of our components have lead times over 2 quarters, over 26 weeks, right, to procure. And in a ramp, it gets even worse. But our customers' expectation is that they'll deliver, we will deliver to them within 8 weeks or less. So you have this natural conflict that says you need to start acting sooner in order to be able to respond later. And so these informed risk decisions allowed us to make commitments to our customers that will satisfy them, or at least begin to prepare for that, while understanding if the customer doesn't come through, what is the excess inventory position that we will be in, or if we're late to a customer, what are the risks associated with that?
Well, the customer is required to lock in at a certain point. You're saying that's 8 weeks? Or
not
not
always.
Not always?
No, I mean, honestly, we are truly committed to giving the customer what they want. And it could be, in our case, there are times when it's been in the process of being built and configured, and we've gone back and made changes on behalf of the customer. So we are the ultimate configure to order house, in a sense.
Were you finding it difficult in years past in order to kind of survive in this sort of environment? Did there come a moment where you said, we've got to make some changes, we've got to make some improvements?
Absolutely. It was a moment where, you know, after the second or third time where you've been beat up because, well, you know, I was given a forecast from marketing, and that's what I built to, or that's what I procured to. That's not really good enough. And so we really embraced that and said, you know what, we need to own this, right? Because we can't predict it, we need to own it. And what we did in that case was to make these informed risk decisions. So strategic demand, we started taking control of the demand ourselves and saying, this is a strategic demand we want to put in, maybe some upside demand, something of that nature, or strategic inventory, so some strategic supply, for example.
As if things weren't difficult enough, you have the entire trend of manufacturing outsourcing, which I know you folks participate in as well. Does that not create the potential for losing visibility outside the 4 walls of your organization?
Absolutely, and that was one of the things that we recognized very early on. We didn't want to let happen. Different companies can respond in different ways, and how they continue to maintain that visibility. And they have different requirements for the levels of visibility, whether it's just give me an E&O report weekly or tell me what you have on order every week. But we decided we really wanted to maintain that same level of detail that we had when the manufacturing was completely inside of Teradyne. And the reason being that we were making these very important decisions that balanced risk to the company, you know, in the form of excess inventory if the customer didn't come through on the order, versus our ability, just the plain ability, to meet our customers' expectations.
Within a multi-tier supply chain, you have the risk, though, of each tier having its own number for the forecast, and not wanting to share that with anyone else. How well have you done in creating a 1-number forecast that everybody works from in a common way?
I think we've done extremely well. As I mentioned before, we've really embraced this philosophy of, I can't predict necessarily very well. I can't rely on any other groups to have all the answers. So we're going to do the best we can and provide a forecast that isn't just, this is what I think we're going to sell, but it's, this is what I think we need to drive from a demand perspective in order to meet the unknown. That's really the key. And then to your point, right, you don't want that to cascade down and then have the next tier say, well, here's my interpretation of what's unknown, and so I'm going to build on top of it, and you get the whiplash effect. So what we've done is we've built a relationship with our CMs, our contract manufacturers, where they build what we ask them. So they will build to that forecast, and we have agreements around when we take ownership of the material and things of that nature.
How important has your use of rapid response been in achieving this integrated view of the supply chain?
It's really been indispensable. What we did very early on, we've been a customer of Kinaxis for many years, since the late 90s. And what we did very early on when we started outsourcing in the early 2000s was we worked with our contract manufacturers and said, give us the feeds into our rapid response system so I can recreate your MRPs in our system, and we can link them together and get a holistic view of our supply chain. Again, as if we still had the manufacturing within the four walls of the company.
What about inventory management? This is always quite a difficult thing to do with all the different parts and different values. How does your technology support inventory management within your organization?
One of the things that I found in talking to other companies who have outsourced is many times when they say how much liability is in my supply chain, they'll say, well, I have this many POs, or the value of the POs I have up with the contract manufacturer are X. But the reality is, if you said, I'm going to shut down operations today, your liability is really the sum of what they have on hand, maybe what they have on WIP, and some of what they have on order. So the PO might be considered the worst case scenario, but it's not necessarily the most realistic. And so by recreating the supply chain all the way out through their purchase orders to their suppliers, we can more accurately measure what our expected liability is. So if we drop in a new order, we can tell pretty quickly how much new material, for instance, am I going to have to buy in order to support that order? When am I going to have to buy it? So this tool has become indispensable to the inventory management capability we have.
What is next for Teradyne? What's on the agenda of new functionality or improvements that you need to make in your supply chain?
Well, we've recently added several new sites for companies that have been acquired in the last few years. We're on 11.2. We want to get into the 2014, probably 2014.2. But the main thing is, from a functional perspective, we want to continue to expand our ability to leverage this information, this holistic supply chain information that we have, to newer processes, to additional processes, so we can continue to gain control. For example, aside from the decision making that I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we've started doing in the last few years is using this to leverage our excess and obsolete analysis, reserve setting. We also use it to make recommendations to marketing on when's an optimal time to shift from one product to another. So we can take their customer inputs and our supply chain inputs and say, what's the best decision? And maybe it's a mixture of two. So continue, really, that is the main thing, is to continue to leverage, whenever we can, this view of the supply chain.
Well, it sounds like Teradyne has come a long way. Chris, thank you very much for sharing your story. Thanks for being with us.
Appreciate it.
I've been speaking with Chris Vosse of Teradyne. Thank you very much for watching.